Okay, so let's get a picture again of. I don't know. This is a picture of what happens when you are getting a web page. So you're sitting here on your laptop, and the CS server is sitting over there in root hall. So you type HTTP in the browser, and that tells the browser that it's going to use that set of rules to get the document. And so what does it do? It's ultimately going to create, so it's going to use this part here is the operating system and the router, this level here. And the application will do something like, let's see, the browser does something like, let's put it in here. Let's see. I don't know. Server, client, on your web browser, let's see. Your web browser does something like this. When you click enter, when you type enter in your address bar, or okay, so it's doing something like, there's a program, so in the code, your browser, it does OS, give me the IP address for cs.indstate.edu. Let's call this index.php. Let's call it HTML. And then it says HTTP. Okay, create a string with an HTTP request for index.html, and so open a TCP socket to cs.indstate.edu, send the string with the request. Okay, and what does the CS server does something like forever, wait for, let's see if there is a new TCP connection from a client. If there is, read any data. If there is any data, interpret it using whatever protocol, send back information. Okay, so that's the basic thing. All right, so how does the CS server know that you're asking for a web page and you're not trying to get your email, right? Because your email also could be coming from the CS server or Google or whatever. So how does it know? One way that it knows is they just have this extra thing called a port. And so what you think of is you have a machine, this is your server, and there's this is your internet wire. It's a single wire. There can only be one thing coming in at a time. But once it comes into the computer, you read the port, and that sort of like gets split off into different sort of mailboxes or whatever. So this is like the, I don't know, if you're in an apartment building, this is like your apartment number, the port number. So what happens is all this email traffic, web traffic, FTP, PuTTY, whatever, it's all coming in, and then whatever the port is, that tells it what program is supposed to be responsible for it. So we'll say, note, different things need to happen depending on if it is a request for web page, email, PuTTY login, etc. The way the server knows which one is the port number. So there's default port numbers, and then in the web browser has to know that as well. Note, web browser knows to send requests for web pages to port 80. So port 80, you have your IP address, which is your, you could look up, that's probably not active. So the IP address for CS is this. That's a number. I could type that in my browser. And that goes to the CS site. cs.indstate is just a shortcut that's easier for me to remember than that number. Okay, but email traffic is also going there. So what I really need to say is :80 for port 80. That's where the website server is. So if I do that, it goes here. And if you don't specify, so in your up here in your address, you can actually specify a port by putting the colon. If you don't specify one, it assumes you mean 80 because that's the default for web traffic. And there's other ones. There are other default port numbers for other things. 22 is for SSH. So in your PuTTY, somewhere it says port 22, that's SSH. And SFTP, so if you're doing FTP to this server, it also should be port 22. SMTP is, I think, 25. That's sending email. Receiving email is some other number. IMAP for email is something else. All right, so there it is. What's happening on the server is there's something in the operating system that's reading all the traffic. This is going to be generally, there's other kinds, but most of it's TCP/IP traffic. And then first thing it does is it reads the port. If it's port 80, it goes over to the web server program that's sitting here doing web server stuff. That's port 80. If it's port 22, it's doing the SSH server. How exciting is that? Very. Okay. Questions, comments? Why do you care? Because you do. It's in the list there too. Port. Okay. So, notes. We're recording again. So homework 3, I regraded it again. If you're still not passing the validator, you get 0. So don't do that next time. Make sure you pass the validator. And if you're not sure how to fix a problem, first you ask a friend, if you have a friend. If you don't ask a friend. Try somebody in the lab maybe. And if you don't have anybody else to ask, or multiple people don't know how to fix an error, then you ask me. But I don't respond as quickly as your friends. That's why you ask your friends first. Okay, so it's graded. Take a look. If you're still not sure what's going on with your grade, you can ask. I could create one now, if that would be helpful. That's a possibility, which is similar to the quiz. So other things, we only got 15 minutes. So other things, most of you are in 559 with EXO.
Yes.
Most of you are in 650 with Hutchison.
Yes.
So if there's something you want to ask about those classes, like he went too fast about this, we can do that. We can say something about that, like, I don't know, whatever it is. We're allowed to do that. And there's also starting PHP would be the other thing. So we got 15 minutes. You guys can decide or vote. We're going to start looking at PHP. We're going to do I have to do homework 3 and I have to do it in 15 minutes and we see how it turns out. Or the quiz, which is basically the same thing. Or if you have anything that you wanted to ask, like about 559 or 650, another explanation or something. All right, so talk about it for 30 seconds and see what you guys want to do.
Can I do 575?
No.
By the quiz, so by the footer.
I don't know. We'll ask it and give you something different. So if there's more than one name running on the same server, it won't necessarily work right. Often there will be a default. If you don't give a name, it'll default to something or other. All right, so let's see. How many people want to see homework 3 or the quiz? No hands, okay. How many people want to start PHP? There's a lot of votes for that. Is there anybody that has something from 559 or 650 that you want to ask about? Okay, nothing now, but just for the future, if there's something that you don't think is being explained properly, I'm okay with giving a shot at it as well. And here, we can be kind of loose like that. If you need to hear it from 2 different people, that's fine. I'm not going to do your homework for you. So, okay, we'll start PHP. We got 10 minutes or something. So, the next, if you look at the...
So are we done with HTML and CSS?
Okay, HTML, CSS, you know the basics. You probably know enough that you can look things up on your own. There will still be some things that, that you have trouble figuring out, so we'll just kind of add to it as needed. Yeah, so you know the basics. Congratulations. We'll see on the quiz. I mean, beyond what we know already, most of it is just more tags, more properties, more attributes to know. So that's stuff you can look up. All right, so if you look at the lecture slides from the Washington course, there's Intro to PHP, there's PHP, there's PHP, and more PHP. They go on for about, looks like 3 weeks or something like that. So we'll be in PHP land for a little while. Go ahead and start taking a look at those slides. They're good summaries. I'm not going to really just go through the slides. I'll just, as an example, what you should do, read the stuff, but then they'll give, so they give little short examples of the different ways to do things. How do you create a variable? It's different than C. In C, you would say int I, right? Here you would just say I equals. You don't declare it. How do you know what type it is? If you use an integer, it'll be an integer. If you use a string, it'll be a string. Okay, so start looking through the first couple sets of slides on your own. We'll put that in here for next time. 9:15. Look through first few PHP lecture slides. It's a good reference, especially because you already know some programming by now, so what they're talking about will kind of make sense to you. All right, so let's start with some simple examples. Let's see, is that big enough? Okay, so PHP goes into a text document just like C does. What do you do if you want to run a C program? There's two steps to a C program. First you compile, then you run, right? So PHP is interpreted. There's no compilation step. We could do something like print hello world. Um,
We don't have a question mark at the end.
hmm. Why is this not? I guess, all right. Okay, so if you want to run a PHP, you can do a PHP is normally used inside of web pages. So you have your web page, and inside of, so we can look at the department web page, which is index.php, and you'll see HTML tags, these divs, but then you'll also see PHP code. So this is the way you'll normally use it and see it. What does this code here do? It's like pound include in C. It goes and grabs this file and it runs it. And then there's other PHP down below to do other things. But you can also run a PHP program just as sort of a standalone program like C, but there's just one step. You just run it. Okay, and what are some things you've done in 559? Simple program. Sorting. Okay, so we could do sorting, or we could do whatever. Let's do a prime tester. You do a prime tester. X equals 23 is 23 prime. Da, da, da. There's our prime tester program. Is it actually going to work? I don't know. We'll find out. So there's your create a variable just by using it. Variables always start with a $sign when you declare them and when you use them. True and false, or capital true, capital false. You could use 0 or 1 as well. That still works. For loop, you can use the same way you do it in C, and then there's another way to do it too. But so here's initializer. Start testing from 3. Go up to as long as I squared is less than x. That's like going up to the square root of x. Test whether x mod I is 0. So is I a factor of x? If it is, you found a factor. And then at the end, if you ever found a factor, then it's not prime. If you never found a factor, it is prime. So that's just your classic prime test. You got an if test, a for loop, and you got some variables. You should also test whether x is even. All right. What are the chances that this works on the first try? Parse error. Okay, so syntax error line 9. Yeah, $0. That's not a thing. Okay, 23 is prime. Let's test 27. 27 is not prime. Okay, so there you go. So let's see. It'll work. You can try it. So here's what we can do. We can have some simple assignments where you do some simple things just with PHP that's without HTML in the way, just to make sure you have the syntax down. And then once you have that, we can start putting it inside of web pages. Even when you get to the point of putting it inside of web pages, you can still run it like this. So I can go over to where the department website is and say php index.php. So that'll go and take the HTML, PHP stuff, it'll run the PHP code and print some HTML file as a result, like that. If there was an error in my PHP, I would see it here. What happens if you load a PHP page in your web browser and you have an error in your PHP? Does your web browser tell you? Let's create one. So September 10th.php. So let's see. Doc type HTML. Is that right? When I do something wrong, tell me. Okay, so what happens here if I type September 10th.php over my browser in that directory? So what happens, and in the UW slides there's a picture of it, so let's see, let's go over here. This picture. My computer says CS server, give me September 10th.php. That goes through all this garbage. Up here, the web server says they want to see index.php. It'll go and take the code inside the tag and run it here first. And then the results will get sent back. So that's why in your PHP, generally what will happen is you may be printing. So this prints to like the HTML file. It doesn't change this PHP file, but what gets sent back to the client. This should be in there. Let's try it. Isn't that exciting? All right, but now if I put a syntax error, print 10. I don't think that's something that I'm allowed to do, so I just see nothing. If you view source, there's no source. What happened was over here, the web server tried to run my PHP file, there was an error, and there's no results. So when you get that, you go back over here and you say PHP, let's see, I'm in the wrong directory now. And then you see the parse error on line 8. You go fix it. So generally when you're making a PHP file, you do your HTML, you make sure it looks okay, you put your PHP in, run it here first to get rid of syntax errors, then look at it in the browser. Let's just fix that. All right, so this is the plan. Homework 4, let's say it's going to be due, this is the WordPress thing. Did I give you a file name to use? Let's say it's going to be due Thursday, so then you should already have something, for Tuesday because you have problems and stuff. There's going to be a homework 5 with PHP. Maybe there's going to be a homework 4.5, your index.html or index.php file. So that'll be just create something that's going to be like your home page. So not just random stuff, but it'll be stuff about you. I'll have to make something up. So we'll talk about that stuff next time. So for now, look through the PHP stuff, and you can plan on this is going to happen. This WordPress thing is going to be due. And your index, make that look however you want it to look. So what you're thinking is you're going to be applying for jobs, and you can use this as something on your, as a link at the top of your resume or something. So you have a website and you can put projects there and stuff that somebody could look at. All right, that's the plan. The end.